Want to know why you should stick with Brandon Aiyuk and Garrett Wilson in some tough matchups this week? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we look at our wide receiver and tight end rankings for week 5, only on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL betting and fantasy football, of course, for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, Michelle, this is my favorite day. You like the running back and quarterback rankings a little bit more, but I'm into the wide receiver and tight end rankings, and I like them this week. There's a lot of good matchups. There's also some significant buys here with Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, not in action, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and then you also lose the two Buccaneers guys, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So you might be extending and playing some wide receivers you normally don't play. We'll get into how we break it down for this week in a moment. This crossover Thursday episode brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, Michelle, let's dive right in here. And the biggest question, we'll get into that first here. Cooper Kupp. What do we do with Cooper Kupp? He was limited by the designation in practice on Wednesday, but Sean McVay followed up and said he did everything needed in practice here. So it looks like he's going to be activated for this game against the Eagles. Not a bad matchup. The Eagles have been given a lot of points to wide receivers. Now, do you think he's back in the fold? Right now, we have him pretty high in our rankings. You have him a little bit lower than I do, but I think we're about even to say, like, Cooper Kupp, you got to play him, right? We have him at number 20. And a good spot where if he returns, we have to go with him all in here. So I really like Cooper Kupp. I think you have to play him if he's in there for the Rams. I don't know what you can expect, but he's Cooper Kupp. And I think at least he should be one of your 3 best wide receivers on your team.
Yeah, you're playing Cooper Kupp, and don't be worried about Puka Nacua with Cooper Kupp back. We've seen now, Matthew Stafford is throwing the ball a ton. He's getting a lot of passing yards. He's not throwing a ton of touchdowns, but Cooper Kupp is his dude that he loves to throw touchdowns to. So maybe he'll catch some of those balls in the end zone. But also, we've seen multiple players get a lot of targets in these games. I mean, last game it was Tyler Higbee and Puka, but the prior weeks it was Puka and Tutu Atwell. So now I just think it'll be Puka and Cooper Kupp moving forward. So I think you play them both with confidence. And I do have Puka ranked higher this week than Cooper Kupp, just because maybe Kupp's snaps are limited, but you play them both. And then we have another guy who's been killing it, at least in 2 of his 3 games. It's Brandon Aiyuk with Deebo Samuel hurt last week. George Kittle, I don't even like, he was like a ghost in that game last week in a great matchup. So that was shocking. But now he gets the Cowboys, a tougher matchup, but without Diggs there, Trayvon Diggs. Are you worried at all about Brandon Aiyuk, or is he just, you're going to play him anyways, but how high do you think he ranks this week?
Yeah, the one good thing I'll say quickly about the Rams is they could throw a ton against the Eagles. So that could create more targets for everybody around here. The Eagles are very good against the run. Kyron Williams is a little bit banged up, and you just have to throw a lot if you're going to catch up with the Eagles. So it actually might be a good environment for all your 4 Rams assets to have some viability this week, especially with the bye weeks and some people left there. Now, I think Brandon Aiyuk at this point, Michelle, he's slowly transcending. It's not just he's the complement to Deebo Samuel, right? I think he's the number 1 receiver. I mean, the game last week, he's just leaving corners in his dust. And he just did that in week 1 against the Steelers. He just destroyed them. And since then, he's just been locked in. So this guy's had this type of talent since he was a first-round pick. Now he's just blowing the doors off here with his talent. So I think he's a guy that is getting there to that Justin Jefferson level where it doesn't matter what the matchup is. He's going to get schemed open. He's going to deliver, and he can just run routes all over. So I love Brandon Aiyuk. I love his chemistry with Brock Purdy. he's an every week play to me. And I think, Michelle, you might be soon, doesn't matter what the matchup is, at least a wide receiver 2 floor with him.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll take it that far with the floor. Like last week, it was 6 targets. He caught all 6 receptions, and he just turned it into 148 yards. But the week prior, the last game he played in week 2, he turned 6 targets into 3 receptions for 43 yards. So he's not getting a ton of targets because that's the offense he's in. It's 2 stacked. They spread the ball around and they run a ton, right? So it just depends on what he does with his 6 targets in any given game, because he's not going to ever be a guy like Jefferson who gets 13, 14 plus targets in a game. He's just unfortunately just not in that offense. But he does, I do think he's just a weekly play because you know what he is capable of doing. So I have him ranked as my wide receiver 10 this week. I think he's a good play. You obviously are plugging him in for that upside. Another guy that we both agree has a lot of upside this week. We've been down on him as of late, the last couple weeks, but he has too good of a matchup. It's against the Broncos. I am a little bit higher on Garrett Wilson than you are. I have him at wide receiver 11. You have him at wide receiver 19. But still, I mean, we've been ranking him in the 30s as of late. So this is really high for us. Against the Broncos, you just can't ask for a better matchup, really. I mean, over the course of the season, they've already allowed Tyreek Hill, Jacoby Myers, and DJ Moore to each put up over 27 fantasy points against them. We saw Garrett Wilson be hyper targeted last week. If he gets those same targets against the Broncos, he's going to have a monster game.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Pat Surtain too. He actually is not playing all that well. I looked more into the numbers here. He was a shutdown corner last year, but it's kind of funny. These top corners can go season to season with the way they play. And sometimes it's the level of matchups they face, and if it's a type of receiver that they can't handle as well. Now, the good thing about Garrett Wilson is they can move him around, and the Jets are going to make sure he gets the ball now in every week, and he can work the slot if needed here to avoid that matchup with Surtain. They don't really have a good number 2 corner, so a sneaky play this week after he scored could be Allen Lazard. If you're really hurting, look, the matchup is as good as it gets because the number 2 corner for the Broncos is terrible. I mean, Surtain's not playing well, but he's not the number 2 corner. So when you look at that, it's going to be opportunities for this Jets pass game to kind of stay hot. And it's a good timing. I like when we see some signs of life, right? We talked about Breece Hall. We had signs of life from that offense in a tough matchup. So it makes you feel a little bit better in an easier matchup. So it's a good timing for that Jets and the offense. And I think the Jets are going to go in there and win the game because I just like a lot of their matchups. That includes Garrett Wilson this week. Now, Calvin Ridley, again, anything with the Jaguars has kind of been up and down here. I have him all the way at number 13. You have him still pretty high at 19, Michelle, but
it's too high. I know. I have Calvin Ridley too high still, and I'm at 19. You're the believer at 13 against the Buffalo Bills, who, they held Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to both, 10 or fewer points last week, held Terry McLaurin to 10 points in week 3. But it's going to be Calvin Ridley and his 2 targets that destroys the Bills.
I think this week it's better because I think there's a couple things going on here. Christian Kirk has the toughest matchup now. It used to be Calvin Ridley, but Tre'Davious White went down, so he's not going to have to face Tre'Davious White. The Bills have one of the better nickel corners in the league in Teron Johnson. So now what you'll see is Christian Kirk will move from the outside where he was for last couple games because Zay Jones is returning. Revenge game for Zay Jones, by the way, the former Bill on the outside. So this actually gives one more weapon and maybe another reason that Trevor Lawrence can actually have some success in the shootout. He does like Zay Jones in there. So you get Jones in there with Kirk and Evan Ingram and Calvin Ridley. Now he's got his full complement of weapons here. So I think this is more a Ridley game. It's like a Ridley or Kirk game. Where are we going to go this week in terms of inside-outside? I mean, Kirk was playing on the outside as the number 2. So now you have getting into it a little bit. Ridley all of a sudden has a man. If Tre'Davious White was out there, Michelle, I'd be like, no, I can't do it. But White is not there, and it kind of is a trickle-down effect. Their secondary is a bit banged up, but I think their best player is Teron Johnson out there along with their safety. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Ridley. I just want him to get more targets. You're right. He's not getting the ball enough here. It looks like Trevor Lawrence is like, I know you, Kirk and Ingram. I don't know you, Calvin Ridley. So I'm going to throw to these guys a little bit more. They're my boys from last year. So maybe that'll change with Zay in the mix this week. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, Chris Olave, we both loved him last week. We talked him up so much. And then we had Derek Carr play with his gimpy shoulder. And
Yeah, to be fair, when we talked him up, we did not know Derek Carr was going to try to.
It ruined everything. Like Derek Carr stopped ruining things for our fantasy team, for our just reality team. If you're a New Orleans fan, sorry, shout out to Ross Jackson, but you don't want to really look at that every week. You want to have someone who can push the ball downfield. You don't want 13 receptions for basically nothing to Alvin Kamara. So the good news in this matchup, Michelle, for Derek Carr or Winston, I think it'll probably be Derek Carr. You have no Matthew Judon, the best pass rusher by far for the Patriots. He's out for the season. Their young corner, Christian Gonzalez, was playing well. They had to go bring back J.C. Jackson this week.
Who was really good for the Patriots. Yeah. So that will be interesting.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting what happens. But I don't think this New England defense is what we think the New England defense is. Sometimes we worry about the reputation, like Bill Belichick's going to scheme, but after a while, you don't have enough players. And I think these two guys, Judon and Gonzalez, were actually their best two defensive players early in the season. So you lose that pass rush, a little easy pressure that I think the Saints can go into there and win the game. It's going to be hard to take Olave out of the game because you got to worry about Michael Thomas, the deep threat of Shaheed, and maybe Belichick will choose to contain Alvin Kamara, right? Knowing the arm strength of Derek Carr. So Olave, they got to get him going on shorter routes. Get him the ball. He's not just a guy that you have to throw 30 air yards to get the ball. Like, throw to him in space, too. He can be more explosive than Michael Thomas. So we'll see if they make that overcorrection this week. But we're sticking with him. We're pretty high.
But is there an overcorrection to make? That's my worry, right? I just think it comes down to Derek Carr's health with his shoulder and his stubbornness to play for no apparent reason. Like, you're not good when you even have a good shoulder. I don't understand. So that's my worry here. I have him at wide receiver 15. You have him at 12. So, we're still saying you should play Chris Olave. It's just if Derek Carr is still out there without a shoulder that he can push the ball even 10 yards on the field, it's not going to be a good day from Chris Olave. So maybe the team smartens up and just play Winston, please.
Yeah. Maybe it'll happen sooner than we think here. If Derek Carr continues to look bad, they have to shut him down. So there's that potential, and Dennis Allen might be coaching for his job. So we'll see about that too as well. So one player that we wanted to – actually two players we're going to talk about. These are kind of guys that have emerged here this season and guys that have maybe become regular plays, but we're still going to be worried about them. I look at Nico Collins and Gabe Davis. I'm really high on Gabe Davis this week, again, at 15. I've got Nico Collins down at 24. I think we're a little bit reversed on this, right, Michelle? So I think – I'm looking at the matchups more, and I try to figure it out. And number two receivers are always really fun to figure out. Davis, and I guess you would call Collins the number one right now in Houston.
Yeah, it's just so hard to sit Nico Collins, right? I mean, 3 of his 4 games have been really good for fantasy. 2 have been monster games. And he's always going to have, he's Nico Collins, right? So he is going to have those games like week 3 where he kind of disappears. But I think you just keep playing him for those huge games, and he's getting a ton of targets. I think you can play both Nico Collins and Tank Dell on the regular. And one of them, at least, is going to have a huge game. I'm not so worried about the Falcons' defense. I think Houston just has to pass. They're not going to be able to run. So there should be a lot of targets to go around to both guys this week.
Yeah, it's very similar to the Jaguars, right? I mean, you have Tank Dell. I'm not saying he's a dedicated slot guy or anything, but sometimes the matchup, it does not favor Nico Collins, and you just go to Tank Dell. Same thing with Kirk versus Ridley, kind of watching that a little bit. And these quarterbacks, Stroud and Lawrence, pretty much go to the right matchups every week. So Nico Collins, just be a little bit wary of this Atlanta Falcons pass defense. They have one really good corner in A.J. Terrell. He's got some size, so you figure he's going to be containing Nico Collins a little bit. I do have Dell ahead of Collins this week, but Michelle's right. You should think about playing these guys. They just have too much upside with C.J. Stroud dealing right now. And Gabe Davis, look, I think it's hard to rank him every week, but he's getting involved. He's scoring on the regular at this point. And you look at this matchup, Michelle, I think one reason I like him, again, look at the corner matchup sometimes. Very good corner that the Jags have here in Tyson Campbell. He's really shut down number one receiver since the beginning last year. So we had a massive Diggs game last week. This could be a big Davis game, I think, this week.
Yeah, I like Gabe Davis this week. I was a little worried about the matchup last week. He came through with the touchdown. That's really what it comes down to with Gabe Davis. Does he get the big touchdown or does he not? But it literally happens every week. So just keep plugging him in.
Yeah, just be confident there. And we're liking it. I mean, Gabe Davis, maybe a year ahead on his breakout, but it's coming here really nicely this season. So we will get into more wide receiver rankings, and then we'll close today's edition of the show looking at our tight end rankings. Some nice sleepers this week. If you're hurting during the bye, streamers that you can look at. So very good stuff there, and we will get to that. But first, a word from one of our sponsors, PrizePicks. All right, Michelle, we give out our PrizePicks picks of the week here on Friday's show. So check it out here. We'll do 3 each for you, and that's how you break it down here on PrizePicks. You pick 2 to 6 players, and you're just looking to see if they go more or less than their PrizePicks stat projection. That's what you're looking for. It's the most fun you can have playing there. You can win up to 25 times your money this football season. You just select 2 or more players. Again, the more you pick, the greater chance you have to win there, and you test your skills to see what you can do here. And you can turn 10 into $250 with just a few taps here. It's really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. You can expect quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So it's really fantastic. You can get in on all the games and have a little bit more there to look at in these games. And often we look at the overs, but check out the under totals as well, where you look at more or less. So it's good stuff to look at PrizePicks. So the more or less makes it a little simpler for you to play there at PrizePicks. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for first deposit match up to $100. Check it out. Here, it's a daily fantasy sports made easy. Great way to get in on the more or less totals there every week for your favorite fantasy football assets. All right, Michelle, let's continue the show. And maybe some of these players you can look at having nice games on PrizePicks this week. Maybe we want to look at Romeo Doubs. He's been fantastic here as really the Packers' #1 receiver. Christian Watson returned and scored a touchdown, but Doubs was still the apple of Jordan Love's eye. Now they get a very nice matchup at home or on the road. I was going to say at home because I feel like there's going to be a lot of Packers fans going to Vegas and walking the strip this week. But yeah, it's going to feel like a home game with Romeo and Jordan Love and Romeo. Love that matchup. I'm at wide receiver 25, just a little conservative because Watson is there. You have him wide receiver 18, but however we look at it, I think he's a strong around wide receiver 2 play almost every week.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 weeks, 12 and 13 targets. I mean,
Yeah.
and he's been scoring, he has 3 receiving touchdowns this year. The Raiders have not allowed a ton of yards to wide receivers so far this year, but they have allowed 6 receiving touchdowns to wide receivers. That's tied for the most in the NFL. So I really like Romeo Doubs this week. Watson's a guy that's just a risky play, but he has high upside. Only played 25 snaps last week coming off the injury. You would expect that to increase. Only saw 4 targets, 2 receptions. He did save his day a little bit with the receiving touchdown. He's a risky upside guy, with Romeo Doubs being the safer play. Another guy we hit on super quickly, and I don't think we need to talk about it too much. It's Tank Dell. We're both high on him this week against the Falcons. Wide receiver 20 for you, wide receiver 25 for me. So just plug them both, Tank Dell and Nico Collins. I think both can have a nice day in week 5.
Absolutely. And I think another pair of wide receivers we're going to look at to be on Doubs, Watson, and looking at Collins and Dell, you look at Jacoby Myers and, of course, Davante Adams. I actually have Davante Adams, Michelle, #1 in the rankings. Why he's playing the Green Bay Packers. He's going to come out and say, why did you go after all these young guys? Remember me? I dominated for years. I'm going to the Hall of Fame. I want to be traded. I want to showcase myself on Monday night, go to a quarterback and a team that's going to win stuff this year. So he's going to be out there. And interesting, Christian Watson, in a weird sort of way, was kind of picked up because of the Davante Adams trade. There was an Alec Pierce pick and all that stuff. But Christian Watson was kind of the replacement. So he's going to be motivated on that side as well, right, to show that he can score touchdowns. Adams is going to go out there and do some things. Even if he has Jair Alexander, they're going to move him around. And Alexander's been hurt also the last couple of weeks. So you look at that, and then Jacoby Myers looking really good here. We have to have Jimmy G back, though. Davante Adams, I think, will go off maybe a little less with O'Connell in there. But I think Adams is a good bet to score twice. So we'll have to see Jacoby Myers getting a little bit of trickle down from that, but this could be a sneaky high scoring game if Jimmy Garoppolo's in there. Because again, the Packers defense, Josh Jacobs is going to run well. That's going to open things up all over the field here for this passing game with play action. So I love it. I wish I could get this on the main slate this game, but I think it's a great game to play in single game DFS this week as well.
Yeah, so I really like Jacoby Myers in this game as long as Jimmy Garoppolo is back. So with Jimmy Garoppolo, he's seeing a ton of targets. So so I'm slugging in Jacoby Myers for sure if Jimmy Garoppolo is back. If not, if it's Aiden O'Connell, then no, he's sitting on my bench. Another guy that he's been all over the place, DJ Moore, right? Does he have another good week after a great week 4? It was against the Broncos. So we got to take that with a grain of salt. I have him down at wide receiver 29. You have him at wide receiver 22. I do think I'm going to end up moving him up since looking at his recent production. I mean, he's been okay. Week 2, 16 points. Week 3, 13 points. Week 4, 27 points in PPR. So he hasn't been killing you since week 1. I think I'm going to move him up a little bit. Against Washington, they have allowed some big games to wide receivers this year. So I think he's still a guy that you can plug in with confidence this week.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup. You had A.J. Brown go off against the Commanders last week. The problem is they have a decent corner there on one side in Fuller, but the other corner is Emmanuel Forbes, and they don't really do any flipping here. So it looks like Forbes, a rookie, is going to get DJ Moore this week or tonight, I should say. And Darnell Mooney is not in a terrible spot if you're desperate. He's getting a little bit more involved as well. And I think Cole Kmet will have a shutdown game here. I mean, after his big game last week. So I think it's going to be a more wide receiver game here, but the DJ Moore should burn the rookie a few times. You also figure the Commanders will be ahead in this game. It's not going to be that even game script we got against the Broncos the last week. The Commanders are near touchdown favorites here on Thursday night. So that'll help DJ Moore get the targets as well. So maybe with his old coach, Ron Rivera, in the house, he'll get a little bit motivated. He is from Maryland, so let's keep that in mind. Went to Maryland. He's coming back to the D.C. area, so he's going to be out there looking to have a good game as well. So, yeah, I'm probably a little conservative on DJ Moore, but I think, Michelle, it all is tied to the front end, right? Justin Fields. So, like, he just has to – I don't know if I can trust him week in and week out to have the outstanding passing performance he had last week. Now, these are some guys that I want to like a little bit more, and I move them up in the rankings. Zay Flowers is Steelers secondary, as you know. Patrick Peterson is now banged up, but him and Levi Wallace have not played well at all this season. I thought they could help them out and play a little bit better than veterans, but that hasn't materialized yet here. Jahan Dotson tonight. The matchup is good. The Bears secondary is pretty weak right now, so another rookie could be in coverage against him, and Tyreek Stevenson, their other corner, is not very good either in Terrell Smith, so something to look at there. And Rashee Rice, if there's one secondary that you should target that isn't the Tennessee Titans, it is the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, they are bad on the back end. So I want to trust these guys more, but I'm worried a little bit about their usage and getting involved, even with some good quarterbacks here.
Yeah, and I think the one guy that I think has the highest ceiling this week out of this group, and I think I'm just going to plug him in and risk it. It's Rashee Rice against the Vikings.
Yeah.
He's leading the Chiefs wide receivers in targets and receptions, right behind only Travis Kelce. So he is the top wide receiver on this team. It hasn't led to too much yet, but we're finally seeing his snaps increase over these last 2 weeks. He's on the field way more. And not only have the Vikings allowed a huge fantasy day to guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Devonta Smith and Mike Evans, they've also allowed good fantasy days to Adam Thielen and Josh Palmer and Terrace Marshall, who all scored over 14 fantasy points against them. So I do think Rashee Rice, this could be his big breakout game. And that's the one out of this group that I'm most willing to plug into my lineups for that huge possibility.
Yeah, and those are some really good options here. We'll talk about one more player, and then we can get into our tight ends here. Michael Wilson, you like him this week against the Bengals? I mean, they're not a shutdown secondary by any means. He's come on. Marquise Hollywood-Brown is also looking good. So I think you can play him this week as wide receiver 3.
Yeah, that's exactly what he is. He's a risky play, but if you need to plug in a guy, like you said, the Bengals aren't shut down right now, and Michael Wilson's looking good. He got a lot of targets, got a lot of snaps. So you can plug Michael Wilson in if you need to. Let's jump into our tight ends to finish our rankings for week 5. But first, we need to hear from a couple of our sponsors. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and enjoy the NFL season. Again, that's fanduel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. The show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Do you ever find that just as you're trying to fall asleep, your brain suddenly won't stop talking? Do your thoughts start racing right before bed or at other inopportune moments? I personally have dealt with this quite often. It turns out one great way to make those racing thoughts go away is to talk them through. Therapy gives you a place to do that so you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. With BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com. Better, HELP.com/lockedon. Give online therapy a try at BetterHelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to being your best self. All right, Vinny, unfortunately, we have to talk about tight ends.
Yes.
And
We'll do
at
this
the top,
quickly.
yeah, at the top, it's no shocker here. We have all the same top 4 guys: Kelsey, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, and Sam Laporta.
Yeah.
Plugging them in every week. Those are your safe guys. I think Evan Ingram's getting to that as well.
Yes,
I have him
he
at 5. You have him at 7. He's just like, he's a safe bet, kind of, as safe as you can get a tight end. It's disgusting. But what in the world do we do with George Kittle and Darren Waller? Because these two guys are disappearing way more than I knew. George Kittle has always been highly inconsistent, but this has been terrible for him. So what do you do against George Kittle against a good Dallas defense?
Yeah, I think you have to start him. It's how bad tight end is that you just have to start and hope, because when you put him on the bench, that's when he's going to have his touchdowns. I mean, he's just too talented where he could go off in any week. I mean, some of these other guys are just not talented, not doing anything. But this is a week that you might see him do something, right? I mean, I think the Cowboys are not bad against the tight end, but I think you're just stuck playing these guys. I think Darren Waller, there's a little bit more hope for him against the Dolphins this week, but really it's the front end. Daniel Jones has to get going. It's the same thing with Kittle. Brock Purdy's just been too good. Like, Daniel Jones has been bad. Brock Purdy's throwing the ball to Brandon Aiyuk downfield, and Christian McCaffrey stealing all the thunder here with the scoring. So it's 49ers are too good. The Giants are too bad, and it's not helping Kittle and Waller right now.
Oops, was muted there for a second. I think I feel better about Darren Waller against the Dolphins than George Kittle against the Cowboys. Like you said, Brock Purdy's just finding the connections with other guys. He's a really good quarterback, and I do think the Cowboys defense is just much better at covering the tight ends than the Dolphins. So, but I don't know what to do with George Kittle, because I think if you plug him in, you're going to get no points, but I don't know really other better options for you.
Yeah, that's why you were on mute, because you just didn't want to talk about these guys.
Yeah, exactly.
I totally understand. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of quiz here this week. I don't know if it's really a quiz. It's more projection. Zach Ertz, Tyler Higbee, Tyler Conklin. These are guys that have good matchups. That's why I'm bunching them all together, because it's kind of ugly to even talk about these guys. But I think if you're really hurting, these are 3 of the better matchups of the week, especially Higbee against the Eagles. He's had a big game against the Eagles. Remember that 3-touchdown game he had against Philadelphia? Tyler Conklin, sneaky, getting more usage here, and the Broncos not very good against the tight end. Cole Kmet, 2 touchdowns last week, so you're kind of chasing that. And then Ertz has been good in good matchups, and the Bengals are good enough.
Yeah, I mean, Ertz has had a hard schedule, and he's still the tight end 8, I don't actually know where he ranks. He's my tight end 8 this week, but he has the second most targets among all tight ends this season, behind only Hawkinson. He's one of just 4 tight ends with 20 plus receptions this season. And he's already faced the 49ers and the Cowboys, 2 of the hardest defenses against tight ends. The Bengals have been soft against tight ends this year. I think Zach Ertz is a fantastic play in PPR leagues. And Tyler Higbee, listen, with Cooper Kupp back, if all the targets go to Cooper Kupp and Puka, I'm not going to be surprised. Like Tyler Higbee got 11 targets last week. That's not going to happen again if Cooper Kupp is back and playing. But like you said, it's a great matchup and tight ends are gross. So he is an option. And I do really like Tyler Conklin this week. I have him ranked a little bit lower, but I'm going to move him up against the Broncos. It's like Cole Kmet just destroyed him. If Cole Kmet can do it, anyone can. So Tyler Conklin's a viable play as well.
Okay, Michelle, this is just our weekly Kyle Pitts update coming, and then we'll get out of here. This is what we have to do when we talk about Kyle Pitts. We just have to end the show after that. I'm at 16. I am at 20, or you have at 20 this week. I'm slowly Jonnu Smith doing stuff last week made me just like, okay, what is going on here? Now you're thrown to a tight end, but it's not Kyle Pitts. So this convinces me that Arthur Smith hates him by also starting Desmond Ridder every week. So look, the matchup against Houston is not terrible, and that's the only reason I have him even in the top 20, and probably that's a reason as well for you. But do I want to play him? No. Thankfully, I don't have him on any team, so this could be it. If he does nothing here, I think the Falcons need to either think about trading him, and I think we can almost get to the point of dropping him too.
Oh, yeah, you can already drop him. Let some other sucker play him because someone's going to pick him up and play him. Like, this is Arthur Smith's dream matchup. The Texans suck at stopping the run. He's going to run 500 times in this matchup. Don't play Kyle Pitts. I don't know how many times I tell you people, don't play Kyle Pitts.
Not anymore. Yeah, it's over, I think, for Kyle Pitts, unfortunately, until he gets a new quarterback or a new team. Let's hope both might happen here soon. So watch out for that. That'd be the only way I think he gives you the value you're looking for. So thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today and every day. Every day as we will come back with our DFS and PrizePicks picks of the week there tomorrow. So thanks again for joining us on the wide receiver tight end rankings for Locked On Fantasy Football. This has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.